Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 375 of the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. Check them out at PerformBetter.com. I'm your host, Anthony Renna. The show notes are located at StrengthCoachPodcast.com. All right, today on the StrengthCoach.com and MBSC.TV Coach's Corner, spoke with Coach Boyle about a couple of tweets that he had out there. One about why teaching starts, other than for someone who's going to the combine, are a waste of time. And then we talked a little bit about training philosophy, kind of using what you like versus what you've learned. For the Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach segment, I have on Jake Tuura. Jake's a strength coach and owner of JackedAthlete.com. He's going to be speaking at the MBSC Spring Seminar. His topic is tendons for trainers. We don't hear a lot about trainers or about tendons. So personally, I was excited to hear about what Jake had to say. So we're going to go over, among other things, tendons versus ligaments. How can maybe we prevent tendon injuries if we can? Is getting stronger the answer? What he means by slow for health, fast for performance, and some protocols and progressions for tendon health. All right, for the Naamly Maximizing the Member Experience with Sumit Seth, Sumi's going to go over the power of systems. I love the acronym. Save yourself time, energy, money, and stress. Good stuff coming up from Sumi in a little bit. Guys, Perform Better, save the dates. The functional training summits are coming. The lineups are not out yet, but the locations and dates are Orlando, May 30th to June 1st, Chicago, June 27th to 29th, LA, not Long Beach, in August 1st to the 3rd, and Providence, August 22nd to the 24th. Now, I will mention, there's no more Sunday. So it's going to be Thursday. They're going to be doing kind of a pre-con, and then they're going to do all day Friday and Saturday with, of course, the social on Friday night. So no more Sundays. So interesting turn here, some different stuff. We're going to get Chris Parier on soon to talk all about it. But right now, check it all out at PerformBetter.com. Lots of things to get to. So let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, guys, now it's time for the StrengthCoach.com and MBSC.TV Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle. Don't forget, you can try StrengthCoach.com out 7 days for free. Go to StrengthCoach.com for your free trial. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Ann. How are you?
All right. Interesting. Okay, so last time we were talking a little bit about some of your presentations. We mentioned the MBSC Spring Seminar coming up. I did rat you out. I told Matthew, because he thanked me for retweeting about the seminar. And I said, I talked to Coach Boyle today, by the way. And so you'll hear on the next podcast, we talked about your seminar. He does. I said, Coach has no idea. He took full responsibility. He said, no,
yes, we actually settled that day. After I got done with you, I emailed him and said, okay, we have not agreed on a topic. Anthony asked me about a topic, and I said, and so I'm going to do the 40 mistakes talk that I did a couple years ago at the MBSC winter seminar, because I think I kind of look at ones that would be well received by a big student audience. And I believe he's letting students in free. I think that's what.
Oh, wow.
He told me, yes. So I think there'll be a lot of students here. There'll be a lot of young people who hopefully will benefit from some of my stupidity. I'm going to give them the benefit of all my dumbness.
Very cool. Well, let's talk about some of your dumbness. One of your tweets was, is your training philosophy based on how you train or what you like? Or is it based on what you've learned? No need to answer, but you might want to think about it. A lot of people actually answered, talked about it. So you definitely got people thinking. But this can be tough from the perspective of if we find results, we kind of tend to like the way we've trained, not my training, not Anthony's training, but I like some of the things that I've done with people or the feedback that I've gotten. And sometimes that can be a little tricky too, and from a perspective of change. But what about, talk about this and just talk about your idea. Like, we know you don't like leg extensions. So, like, even if it's supposed to be kind of good and more people like it again. So, talk to
Yeah,
us about this.
I think I'm just trying to encourage some introspection. That's all. I'm trying to ask a question that will make someone stop and think, because I still see way too many people who, let's just say they're Olympic lifters. And so their training looks like Olympic lifting, or they're bodybuilders and their training looks like bodybuilding. We're not getting past that fast enough in my mind, where we're designing what we think would be the ideal training program, not something that I like to do myself. And I guess that's the point behind the tweet, is to get people to look and think, am I an Olympic lifter? And wow, does my program look a lot like an Olympic lifter's program? Or am I a bodybuilder and does my program, like, it's interesting. In our program, there's never any arm workout. There's no arm farm. There's no arm day. There's no bicep, tricep. My football guys, they want to throw that in at the end. Hey, knock yourself out. But we don't do that with anybody else. And we don't even do it with them. We just let them do it because everybody else does it. So I think you just have to look at this idea of, am I doing what I like? Is it sort of the beer and ice cream thing? Or am I looking at this and saying, hey, what's the best way to do this? And I think that's what I like about our system. And that's what I like about the Exo system, because I think both of those systems are really well thought out in terms of looking and saying, okay, what do I want to accomplish here? And am I thinking that I am choosing the best methods to accomplish that?
I think we could turn it around too. For example, I don't like being a man in his 50s. And I probably never really liked it, but I don't like doing bodybuilding training myself, right? I find it that it hurts me like more like, man, I just did so much chest and it's ridiculous. Or because I've done little phases of it and I'm like, this is ridiculous. I don't like it, so I stay away from it. But that being said, I don't get a lot of men coming to me saying, yeah, I want to get jacked again, right? That's just not me. They're not coming to me for that. And, when you ask them how many days a week are you going to work out, it's 2 or 3. We're not doing body part splits on those days. But I will say, you can turn it around and say, like, you got to be careful of not doing what you don't like as well.
I think so. And that's one of the things I also said, is that I am finding that, and this is what I think is great about our staff meetings, is sometimes I find myself asking myself introspectively, why don't we do that? The thing that's come up lately is there's been a lot of single leg power stuff being done lately on Instagram, say split jumps and the like. And I don't like split jumps at all. So I don't like the idea of jumping out of a split squat position. But I think I told you this. I might have said it on the last podcast. I don't like it because Mike Sullivan got sore. Mike Sullivan
That's right. Yeah.
in the 90s sometime. It's really not a good reason to not like that exercise, particularly when I look now and say, gee, and I said it, I'm saying the exact thing I said last time, but it makes, I want to reemphasize the point. We do so much unilateral stuff right now that people might not get real sore from that, but I have this built-in thing in my mind of, oh, we don't do that. That's a bad exercise. Somebody did that and got really, really sore. So I think you always, and that could be like you mentioned, the leg extension thing. I mean, why I have a thing, I don't like leg extensions because I never liked them as a athlete. I never liked them when I was training. I never liked the way that they felt. And then when I get into the whole functional thing, I thought, okay, non-functional, that's great. I don't like single station equipment. I don't like things taking up space in my weight room. So I think there's all of this stuff that comes into play. And I guess what I'm trying to do, and it sounds so cliche, but I'm really trying to encourage people to think about best practice. Like, what is the best way to do this? And honestly, I think that's our system, right? When you look at our system and say the way that we warm up, the kind of, jump, throw, sprint idea, at least if you're dealing with athletes, the way the workouts are organized, it's all done really deliberately and with great intention. You go back to like my MBSC seminar talk in a couple weeks. Why? I can sit here and we could discuss the whys. When you say, Mike, okay, you can start with foam rolling. Why do you do that? And we could talk a lot about soft tissue and trying to encourage remodeling and trying to encourage changes in that soft tissue. And then you'd say, well, Mike, why do you stretch? Well, because once I've exposed that tissue to the stress of the roller, then what I want to do is see if I can potentially elongate, whether it's change the quality of the fascia, whatever it is that we're doing. We know that these kind of static stretching is going to produce some sort of effect. Again, we can argue the effect, and then you'd say, well, then, why do you do the mobility work? You know what I mean? We could go through the whole lecture, and the difference was you may not agree with my why, but I would have one. There would not be any, oh, my high school coach did it that way. There would not be any, oh, back when I was lifting, I really liked that exercise. There's none of that. And to some degree, there probably was some of that in what I was doing early on, because a lot of people responded to the thread and said, well, I kind of base it on what I do and what I've tried. And I think there's some value to that. But I think what you need to do is you need to try it yourself and say, okay, does this seem safe, sound? Can I do it? Then you need to go and try it in a group setting and say, does this seem teachable? One of the responses I wrote back was another thing that I say that's become very cliche is good in theory, bad in practice. There's a lot of times when I would look at stuff and think, hey, I really think that's a good idea. And then I tried it and thought, that was not a good idea. It was theoretically a good idea. When I tried to implement the idea, it didn't teach as well as I wanted to. It didn't mesh into the program as well as I wanted to. So I think there's a lot of variables there.
One of the things for me too is going back to the dislike or feeling like when I do it, I feel like, okay, I'm a good sample. So I'll give you an example. I chop and lifts for whatever reason. I'm not good at teaching them. I'm horrible at it. And I took him out a long time ago. I tried. And I feel like every time I see like a Greg Rose or a Brett Jones or a Gray or Lee teach the chop and lift, they're pointing out something that I'm doing wrong when I did it. I was like, look, I feel like there's so much confusion with that exercise. So I never do it. So I think that's where somebody, and we're going to talk about this in a minute.
You need to come to like an MBSC mentorship. I think we could help you with that. The funny thing is, I don't tend to do a lot of chops and lifts myself either. I that's mostly because in our athlete program, we always do them. So everybody does them in our athlete program. When I'm doing my limited number of personal training sessions, it just doesn't make my menu. When someone said, hey, you can have a menu, but it can only have 9 items on it, it doesn't tend to make my menu.
Yeah.
So I get it. And that's, I think, again, your demographic, trying to think, okay, I got to get somebody into this half kneel position. I've got to execute the kind of pull push. And our athletes pick that stuff up. And I find it has really good value. Like we've been doing transverse punches and transverse chops. And I think it's really good for rotational sport athletes. And again, right, we're prejudiced because we get a lot of rotational sport athletes. So we tend to train people like rotational sport athletes.
Yeah.
Because we've got a lot of ice hockey players and a lot of lacrosse players. So they're going to be really rotation dominant. And I might look and think football quarterback, yeah, absolutely the same. But I might look and think, really, if I was looking at football lineman, maybe that isn't as important to me.
Yeah.
And I could make a case for why it would be, but I could also make a case for, hey, there might be other things that I want to fit in there. And ultimately, that's all I'm asking people to do. And the first slide of my Start With Why presentation is start with why on one side and the book, Adam Grant's book, Think Again on the other side. I said, because last time I did it, it was just start with why. I want you to start with why. This time I want you to start with why, and then I want you to think again. Think again about your why and ask yourself, am I playing with an old why, right? Am I looking at a why from why? Because Mike Sullivan got sore 25 years ago, or 30 years ago. That's my why for not doing that exercise. Because you can get attached to maybe a bad why, and that at the time seemed really good. And as I've said, I think that's what I'm trying to do with people is get them to look and say, okay, and start with why. Why, some people might say, why we don't Olympic lift. Some people would say because they don't like it. Some people would say, I think it's hard to teach. It takes too long. Some people I think might be, I'm not good at it. I can't demonstrate it well, so I don't do it. There's a lot of reasons why or why not. You could do a whole presentation. Start with why not. I did that one day for the staff. Why we don't.
Ooh. Yeah.
Why don't we do punches? Why don't we do scorpions? Why don't we do, there's lots of things that we don't do. Why don't we do behind the neck push? I could do as many why nots as whys, but I think you just need to have a thought process that's not based, again, because I was discussing this on Twitter with a guy today who was really digging his heels in because I had said, I don't think that strength training is that important to speed. And I've said that before. And he was very, he keeps kind of coming back at, yeah. And I said, I get it. 5 years ago, I would have agreed with you. Now I don't. I think and he said, I've never seen anybody fast who wasn't strong. And I said, that's surprising because I have. I've seen a lot of fast people who weren't strong. I've seen a lot of fast people who didn't like to lift weights. I've seen fast people who only lifted weights when you made them. And I've seen fast people who would, if you said you could never lift a weight again and continue to run, they would absolutely do that. But we get so into our own thought process of, this is what I've done, this is what works for me. And we're probably just not, I guess, trying to look at the bigger picture and saying, I understand that that's great that it works for you. I'm really happy about that. But there is a bigger picture here that we need to look at. And that is, how does it work collectively for a group? And again, we've started to talk about, like at MBSC, we've kind of got 3 groups. And we've got middle school kids, we've got pretty good athletes, and we've got adults. And they're all a little bit different. So even though we may say, for a while, I had said initially, don't even bother stretching and rolling with the kids, just get them moving. And then I watched Mark and his friends go through their growth spurt, and I thought, really bad idea. Got to rethink that one, because they lost flexibility like crazy. I mean, they went from being able to, kids that could easily touch their toes and were really mobile and moved really well, to kids that suddenly couldn't touch their knees and weren't very, very mobile and weren't moving nearly as good. And you thought, wow, I really need to do this soft tissue work and stretching, particularly with the boys through their growth spurt. But so I guess my point is, you always need to be re-examining your whys. And that's why I loved Adam Grant's Think Again. Think Again was probably my favorite book I think I might have read it in 22, and I'd say it was probably my favorite book of 22, because it was just that whole idea. And I said in a couple of things that I wrote, thinking again is learning. Because that's what you do. Well, what do you do when you learn? Well, you think again. You go and you study a topic. Maybe you study it from somebody else, or maybe you study it from, in a different vein. But what you're literally doing is you're thinking again about a topic that you may have had some level of expertise in.
Love it. I like this. I really like the idea. Like we said, it just didn't make my list right now. Maybe it's 10th and I only have 9, but you got to keep the 10th. You have to know about, I didn't do a lot of Olympic lifting with people, only myself. And then didn't really teach it to my demographic, but then I had the hockey players. I'm like, so I, rewatched all Will Fleming stuff, your stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'm teaching it. And they were great at it. And I, because they were kids, hockey players, and I felt like I needed to teach them that. And so it came back on my list, but now it's back on number 10 again for my current demographic. Right.
Exactly.
So, Coach, let's talk another one here. Teaching starts for sprinting, maybe one of the biggest wastes of time in strength conditioning. If you aren't going to a football combine, save time and run flies. I wish I had all the time I spent back. Now, I kind of was surprised at the amount of people, because if like, yeah, really, I mean, I get it. If you're a baseball player, let's have them maybe mimic the stance. If you're a hockey player, mimic the stance. That's how they might start. I totally get the flies. I mean, for the people that really want to teach some kind of a start, great. But the 3 point, it seemed pretty logical to me. Can you just expand on this a little bit?
Yeah, it's. I think it's the same thing that we've been talking about in terms of there are people that do it, and instead of thinking, and it was really funny because one of the guys who chimed in, Tony Villani, who has had an unbelievable streak of combine guys the last 5 or 6 years,
Yeah.
chimes right in and said, "Yeah, we only do it for a couple of weeks before we go to Indy." And here's a guy who people are saying has had the fastest guys the last 5 years. But Tony's a learner. Tony's a thinker. So many of these other people, I guess that's the difference. You can choose to be, if we look at the postures, you can be a learner and a thinker, or you can be a defender. I think there's a lot more defenders in our field than learners and thinkers. And the defenders are people who get taught something and then just defend it to the death. They're probably the people you want working for you, truthfully, because they're the ones who are going to implement the program
Yeah.
exactly the way you
Good
wanted the
point.
program implemented. And they're not going to think and they're not going to ask a lot of questions. But at the same time, I like the learner. I like somebody who's all I want somebody to do is sit back and read it and go, it's we were talking about Tony Holler the other day again, because we realized that a lot of our staff wasn't around when Tony came to MBSC and did his presentation. But everybody remembers his name. Everybody that was there remembers Tony saying, I don't even care if my sprinters lift weights. And honestly, everybody was like looking at me like, what did you do? Why did you bring this guy here? And I thought, thinking to myself, calm down, let the guy talk. Let him explain to you why he feels the way that he feels. And then you can re-examine that in again through your own lens and decide whether you agree or disagree. But he was a guy who got me to think again. He was a guy who got me to go, here's a 60-year-old, highly successful track and field guy who's saying he doesn't think weight training is that important. And my reaction to that is, why is that? What would have brought him to that conclusion as opposed to, he's a fucking idiot, excuse my language. He has no idea what he's
Yeah.
talking about. But that is everybody else's reaction. But mine is, I know him to be a really smart guy. I like his information. Why did he come to that conclusion? And I guess that's the difference for me. And I think part of that is I'm polarizing enough for people where they just want to disagree because it's me. So if I say, this is what we're going to do, someone's like, no, we're not. You don't know what you're talking about. Because they can't wait to tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about. And they can't wait to find something that they can dig their heels in on.
Like the guy who answered that. Now, trainers wasting countless hours on teaching technique for Olympic lifts and their variants, which have no greater transfer to sport than various weighted jumps. That's something worth dropping. So he's just been waiting.
Oh yeah,
He's
he's
been
one of those
monitoring you.
guys. I leave him like I probably should block him, but I leave him there because he's good for these types of discussions. Because I could literally look outside my window right now, snap a picture of the beautiful blue sky, and say the sky is blue, and then he would come back with, I believe it is a shade of aquamarine. I'm not sure that's blue. You know what I mean? Like it wouldn't matter. Like no matter what I say, I don't believe at any point in time has he ever simply liked something that I tweeted. And I would say 90% of the time, he does not fail to comment, and almost all of those comments are negative. But again, I think from a learning standpoint, you need that. If on my Twitter, if I block everybody, then I create an echo chamber, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I block the real assholes, the ones who
Yeah.
just are rude and dismissive, and the ones that threaten to come and beat me up or want to fight me or whatever. I'm like, okay, I'll just block those guys. I think the best one, there's a guy whose Twitter handle is Strength Debates. You would think Strength Debates would want to debate about strength. He literally almost always gets to the point of like, I'm going to come there and kick your ass. And you're like, wait a second, that's not a debate. I'm like,
Me,
who's themselves strength threats? It's like,
yeah. Meet me on the parking lot of MBSC at 3:00.
yeah.
Jeez.
And if you see me, I am huge and I will crush you. I literally have said a couple times, I've posted on Twitter, I said, hitting me is an elder assault at this point now, at least in Massachusetts. So
There you
these
go.
people that are thinking they can come and kick my ass, they're going to get a longer jail sentence after they do it.
All right, Coach. Well, be careful out there on Twitter. We'll let you go. And
I'm just hoping, that none of these people show up and decide that they actually are going to beat me up.
yeah,
Time,
we're
30,
doing the
40
seminar.
years ago, 30, 40 years ago, I could have defended myself, but I don't think right now
Yeah.
probably
Well,
wouldn't be good to fight.
if you want to beat Coach Boyle up, he's having the spring seminar at MBSC. Not a hard man to find. So, Coach, thanks for doing this, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right. Thanks, Ann. I appreciate it.
Welcome back to Naamly's Maximizing the Member Experience segment, where we delve into the strategies and tactics that elevate your business and help you foster personalized connections at scale. Today, we're diving into the power of systems in your gym. Buckle up, because this is an underrated game changer for your member experience. So let's talk systems. Now, I know what you're thinking. Systems means technology, system means software, and who needs more software, right? System means so corporate, and we are all small businesses. This is just not for us. Actually, you would be wrong. Dead wrong. Systems is one of my favorite words, where it offers the goal and the solution in one. Hear this. Systems, when elaborated, stands for save yourself time, energy, money, and stress. Ooh. As a business owner, you have a zillion things to do. You have built your business from the ground up, and everything within it, from the training program to the way you respond to clients, lives inside your head. It can be so easy to believe your staff have absorbed your intimate knowledge of your business just by being around you. But this is very unlikely to be the case. Without systems, you're likely to be stuck in one of the two scenarios. The first has your business doing well, but only because you're running around like a headless chicken, burning the candle at both ends and never seeing your family or loved ones. The profits may be flowing, but you, my friend, are holding a one-way ticket to burnout. The second system's free business is floundering. Mistakes are made constantly, customers are unhappy, and any wins on the board feel like fluke. This is because nobody is sticking to a standard way to doing things. If this is your business, you're probably already burnt out and even starting to wonder why you even bother. So here's the deal. Whether it's checking in on and communicating with members, cleaning equipment, or scheduling classes, every successful gym operates on systems. And here's the kicker. Even if you have systems for one part of your business, it doesn't really matter. What you really need is a series of systems that work hand in hand to provide that consistent experience. And that happens only if everyone's on board. Yes, I mean everyone, from the desk staff to the trainers, all the way up to you, the owner. Imagine this. A new member walks in and the front desk is a breeze. They're impressed. Next, they hit the floor and it's spotless. Wow, right? Then they join a class and it starts on time with a trainer who's prepared and enthusiastic. This just isn't another gym. It's an experience. And that's what keeps them coming back. But what if one part of that system fails? If it's the front desk that's disorganized, or the training floor is a mess, or that class starts late, suddenly the member's experience is inconsistent. It's like a domino effect. And in our world, consistency is key. It's what builds trust and loyalty with your members. So, how do you get everybody on board? First, communicate the why. Help your team understand the impact of their role on the member experience. When they see the bigger picture, they're more likely to buy in. Second, systems are fantastic for enhancing member experience, but they also make life so much easier for your team. And to do that, put down clear guidelines and procedures. That's the beauty of well-implemented systems. It reduces their stress and uncertainty. They know exactly what's expected of them and how to handle various situations. This kind of clarity can be a real lifesaver in their day-to-day work life. And finally, number 3, it's imperative that we lead by example. Be the first to follow the systems you've put in place. When your team sees you walking the walk, they'll be right there with you. Remember, a well oiled machine isn't just about efficiency, it's about creating an atmosphere where members and staff both feel valued and taken care of. And isn't that what we are all here for? So take a look at your systems. Are they working for you, your team, and more importantly, your members? Because when they do, the experience is not just good, it's consistently great. And that's what keeps members coming back for more. If you're looking for a systematic support with member communication, task management for your team, and easy to use automation to keep your business running smoothly, aka a system, and bring all of your people on the same page, then reach out to us at Naamly. And if you're interested in getting more insights on how you can build consistent, personalized connections at scale, then click the link here. Thank you.
All right, guys, now it's time for the Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach segment. And today I have on Jake Tuura. Jake's a strength coach, owner of Jacked Athlete, where he teaches athletes and coaches principles on muscle gain, jumping higher, and rehab from jumper's knee. He's going to be speaking at the MBSC Spring Seminar, doing tendons for trainers. So I'm excited about it. Now, you might have heard Jake's name from Mike over a couple of years. I think it was Jake. I don't know. Was it a couple of years ago where you did the podcast with Jill Cook, and Mike absolutely loved it and he learned a lot from it. And that's when you guys started having a little bit of a relationship. So first of all, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So was it 2 years ago that you had Jill on your podcast?
Yeah, I think it was 2020 because I just started getting into. I don't know why the patellar tendon stuff started coming. Actually, I had posted Cal Dietz from Minnesota had a video, and he posted on what type of athletes get muscle injuries and then what type of athletes get tendon injuries, and it was saying that if you lift really heavy, you strengthen the muscle, but the tendon doesn't get trained. And then if you do explosive stuff, the tendon gets trained and the muscle doesn't necessarily. I mean, just being hyperbolic there. That's not completely accurate. And then one of my friends from an old strength coach said, well, that's kind of true, but it also goes a little deeper. And he linked me a Keith Barr video on YouTube. So I watched that thing like 20 times. And then that got me to do a podcast with Keith Barr. And then I somehow found Jill Cook and did a podcast with her. I just started doing podcasts with everyone because the tendon, all of this information was new to me. None of it was really at the forefront, at least for me, having someone dealing with jumper's knee for many years. So yeah, that podcast with Jill was like, I was blown away for like the whole 60 minutes that she was talking, because she was saying things that I had never heard. And they actually a lot of them went counter to the PT that I had gone through for the last, I went through PT 3 years. And all the things Jill was saying was like, this is kind of the opposite of how I was trained, and my tendon never got better.
Yeah. So actually, let's take a step back, because I was so excited about this interview because I was telling you earlier, I don't really think we get enough information on tendons, really. And I think we do kind of lump them in with the ligaments, right? And we do feel like, well, we train muscle. We're strength coaches. We train muscles. So I was really interested in learning more. And I think, again, like you talked about with the patellar, it can be a pretty common injury. And then we're looking at a lot of Achilles tendon injuries right now. So I just think in general, it's a topic we don't hear about. So let's start out with tendons versus ligaments. Can you kind of make that distinction? And let's start talking about training for tendons.
Yeah. So I guess what are the ligaments people really care about is like the ACL, and then that one in the elbow for the throwers. There's not I guess it's probably some ligaments in the ankle, but like I guess all the ligaments, they just connect a bone to a bone. So it's like giving stability to the joint. And it's pretty much made of the same stuff as a tendon, actually, like collagen. type 1 collagen, but it's not really well aligned. It's kind of messy. Like if you look at a tendon, it goes in the line of force. The muscle pulls on the tendon, and the tendon kind of has this linear line of force that it needs to go into the joint. Versus a ligament, I think it's because a ligament needs to keep the joint stable, and it's subject to all of these different loads. If you think of the ACL, like it can be pulled in all different ways. So you want the collagen to be kind of pulled in all different ways, like laid down in all different ways. So when it comes to like ligament training, there's no specific way to train ligaments. I think you just do anything that would load the joint. Like if you're going to train your ACL, you can do lifting, or you can do jumping, or you can do sprinting. Like all of these things are going to stress the ACL, which is going to train it. Versus a tendon, you kind of have to get, because the tendon is attached to a muscle, you have to get the muscle to activate. So like if it's the patellar tendon, you have to get a big activation of the quadriceps to pull on the patellar tendon. Because if you look at I guess a tendon or a ligament, they're kind of stupid structures, because there's not too much innervation from the brain. They're not contractile tissues, a muscle you can contract. You can sit there and contract your quad. You can't sit there and contract your ACL. You can't sit there and contract your patellar tendon. So they're kind of stupid structures that just respond to what the environment's doing. An ACL responds to whatever position the joint is in, and it's going to get pulled, and then it's going to have an adaptation. It's going to get pulled on a certain number of times, and then it's going to get collagen synthesis. It's going to I guess get stronger. Same thing for a patellar tendon and Achilles tendon. You pull on the thing many times, you have repeated flexions of the joint, and you get collagen to lay down in the structure. So it's kind of a stupid thing that is just at the whim of what the muscle or the joint is doing. So yeah, I guess long answer, but the ligaments bone to bone, stressed in many different ways. The tendon muscle to bone, pretty much stressed when you get a big muscular pull on it. I mean, there is argument. It does get muddy. All these things get a little bit muddy. There is argument of like, you could get to a deeper joint position. Like if you're talking about your Achilles, I think if you want to train your Achilles, you have to have the soleus and the gastroc working very hard to pull on the Achilles. But then there are lines of argument, because the tendon is stupid, you could just do a calf stretch. And the calf stretch is also going to pull on the Achilles, because the joint position has changed. I don't know how I feel about that. Because again, you're getting the flexion, you're getting the extension of the tendon, and then it's going back to relaxed. So stretching maybe could, in theory, train the tendon somewhat. I just don't think it's been found. And we were talking off air. It's like you only really need to worry about these tendon issues when someone gets a tendon pain. There's really no prevention for these things. So I'm like, if you want to train the Achilles or you want to train the patellar tendon, I don't think your main thing to do is stretching the calf or stretching the quad. I think it's just strengthening your quad and strengthening your calf. And that's going to strengthen your Achilles tendon, strengthen your quad and patellar tendon. So yeah, the tendons are all about the muscle. Ligaments are all about what is the joint doing.
Okay, so I'm a little confused from the preventative piece here now, because one thing that I think we've been told for a long time is we don't really, almost similar to what you're just saying, you don't have to worry about tendons or ligaments if you're strengthening the muscles around it. So I've heard for so long, okay, if you want good good knee health, let's strengthen the quads and the hamstrings and the calves, protect it, make sure we're doing those things to absorb force, create force in that area. Like Coach Boyle says a lot with ACL training, that was always the question or the article that he wrote, right? Is ACL training just good training? Do you feel like it's similar? Because you said, hey, don't mention it.
Yeah.
Unless, so yeah. Is it similar? Is it a similar idea with the training?
Yes, I think it is. But Keith Barr said it perfectly, is as you increase performance, you also increase likelihood of injury. And that is completely true for a tendon. Is if you're going to stress a tendon to the point of tendon pain, or if you're going to stress a tendon to the point of tendon rupture, you only really do that when you put a very high a very high stress. So a very high stress on the tendon. And how do you put a high stress on the tendon? Is you have crazy high levels of performance. It's like the person, take for example, if you jump 15 inches and if I have you jump 15 inches, you're not really pulling on your patellar tendon that hard because you can't. You only jump 15 inches. If you jump 50 inches, you're going to be you're going to be yanking on your patellar tendon. And go back, it's a stupid structure. It's like a passive structure. It just does what your nervous system and what your muscle are capable of doing. So as you increase performance in an athlete, you also increase the damage that they accumulate, especially in the patellar tendon, the Achilles tendon. Like the dude in the NFL, Greenlaw, he was just like hopping up and down, and then he goes and sprints and ruptures his Achilles. And then people, there's like a lot of I don't. There's some judgment online of like what he could have, and I think it's stupid to, unless you worked with a guy, you don't really know what's going on. But I'm like, if me and you if me and you could perform with his level of athleticism, we would probably rupture our tendons immediately. Like this dude, he's in the NFL. He's so explosive. Of course, those guys will rupture their tendons. They're running. They're capable of putting so much force into the ground, which just means it's going to cause more damage on your Achilles. Now this whole argument, I hope that makes sense, right? About as you increase.
Yeah, it's still, yeah, absolutely. I get it. Look, hey, you're going the high levels.
I want to clarify, because then you kind of reach a different level when you get older. Like when someone gets 40, 50, 60 years old, is like, then the tendons can start to get very compromised because of metabolic issues. The metabolic issues are bad for the tendon cells and the collagen and the cross-linking. So you can actually get an unhealthy tendon as you get older. And I'll use a case study. I was reading this on PubMed a few years ago. This guy got total knee replacement, and he was getting off the toilet, and he ruptured his patellar tendon just getting off the toilet. So you can have a very compromised tendon, which then doesn't take too much stress to rupture. But if we're talking athletes, like we're talking high school, college, like pro athletes, they're usually pretty healthy, like 30, 35 years old and less. Their tendons are probably not too compromised from the metabolic influences, from the aging influences. They can be compromised because they've just done a lifetime of overloading. And then the collagen some of the fascicles start to get damaged. They have to use other areas of their tendon. There's not as much of the cross-sectional area that's healthy. So then the healthy areas get stressed more than the unhealthy areas. And then you're kind of prone for more damage. You're prone maybe for rupture. So yeah, I think the tendons, when you go back to the question of what is preventative for tendons, I think it is just good training. But then you also keep in mind that if you have very explosive athletes, they're probably more likely to have tendon issues because they just use their tendons better than everyone else. That's what the explosive guys do.
Yeah. So by explosive, we're also talking just speed, right? Fast, not just the jumpers.
Speed. I kind of lump those together. Yeah, someone who is a fast sprinter, who's like, that's going to load your Achilles a lot. It's going to load your hamstring tendons a lot. Someone who's a high jumper is going to load their patellar tendons, quad tendons a lot. Even like Olympic lifters, Olympic lifters who can Olympic lift a ton of weight. You think of when they're catching it at the bottom of the clean, that loads your quad tendon like crazy, so they can run into quad tendon issues. Yeah, and sometimes you see powerlifters get like patellar tendon pain. I know Jill Cook said it only happens in young jumping males, but I've worked with a number of powerlifters who can get patellar tendon pain because it's not all about the tensile pulling on the tendon. You can also get compression where the tendon mashes against a bone, because a tendon has to connect to a bone. And I think the way some people's patellars are set up, or the way some people's bones are set up, they get more compression, and that kind of causes some damage at the tendon, so they can start to get tendon pain. So yeah, it's usually the people who use the tendons the best are the fast sprinters, the high jumpers, the strong Olympic lifters, probably even the strong power lifters. And I would go further and say those power lifters are probably the more explosive type lifters, the ones who can actually lift the weight faster versus the grindy people. So anyone who moves fast is going to be using their tendons, and just because they are using their tendons so much, they're probably prone to run into tendon issues later down the line.
Interesting. So you talked about let's stay on this preventative or training idea here. In I know obviously you're going to do that up at Boyles and talk when you're in your talk and your topic for tendons for trainers, and you'll do some of that in the practical. But when we talk about, you said slow, you've mentioned a few times, slow for health, fast for performance. So as a trainer, or when you're working with somebody, specifically, are you saying, okay, we need to make sure we have a good dose of both of these? We have to, work slow to make sure that they're healthy, but also we have to do these things that are going to prepare them for the jumps and the speed that they're going to be going at.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I wish there was a perfect ratio, but I have no clue what that is, so nobody knows. But it's like, yeah, so there's this concept with tendons that they're viscoelastic. So if you move very fast, the whole tendon stiffens up, and that is the elastic element. So that is really high stress on the tendon when you move fast. So just use an example of jumping, doing like a vertical jump. You're dropping down and then you're raising up. And that whole motion happens pretty fast. It's not the fastest like a sprint, but it happens pretty fast. And that is when the whole tendon needs to work. I get the analogy is like a sheet. Keith Barr had a good analogy. He called it a sheet. So when you move fast, everything stiffens up, and then you're able to use your tendon like an elastic band, and then you're able to get up. If you were to go down into the squat and do like a wall sit and just hold a wall sit for 30 seconds, the tendon actually relaxes. So all of the molecules can kind of whatever, move around one another. It's a viscous behavior. He said, if you think of a swimming pool, you jump, if you like slap the water as fast as you can, that's going to be like a hard feeling for your hand, versus if you put your hands in slowly, that all the molecules can kind of move around. So it's a tendon kind of works the same. Whenever you move very fast, the tendon stiffens up and it behaves elastically like a stiff spring to store and release energy. Whenever you move slow, that's where you get like the opposite, where I guess the viscous idea that things are kind of able to move around one another. So the Keith Barr research uses it for when you have areas of degeneration, areas that are unhealthy. He'll do the slow stuff because the theory is that when you hold a isometric, say 30 seconds, the strong collagens kind of weaken because I guess what would happen? You have different fascicles within the tendon, and over time, those would weaken because you're just getting weak within the lift. Like any lift, you start to weaken. And those damaged fascicles that don't usually get to feel load because your body shields them, your body shields an injury anywhere in your body shields it from loading. As the strong ones weaken, now the weak ones can feel the load and they can go in the line of force that they're feeling the load. So that's where the slow for health, I think, comes in, is any area that you have that's degenerative or any area that's unhealthy. When you do the fast stuff, you can never train that area. So if you think you have a little island of degeneration in the middle of your patellar tendon, when you do a vertical jump, you're not training that area. You're just compressing it, because all of the strong collagens around there are the ones that are acting like a sheet. And that one is being shielded. And all you're doing is compressing that area. And when you compress an area, there's some research that you lay down more type 2 collagen, which is a cartilage collagen, and you get this aggrecan is one of these substances that's within cartilage as well. So you have an area within your tendon that is more like cartilage. And if you keep doing the fast stuff, you're probably making that area maybe bigger, or you're definitely keeping it as a cartilage material, which you don't want in your tendon. That's non-tendon tissue. You want your tendon to be type 1 collagen, all pretty much all tendon tissue. And when you only do the fast stuff and you have degeneration within your tendon, you could just be making it worse. And the way to get that back online is to do the slow stuff, because the slow stuff is going to have the strong collagens relax. And then that area if it is a cartilage type collagen, that area can now sense that, okay, I'm actually a tendon and I'm not a cartilage material. So then this is all theory. Like you can't, so you can probably prove this in rats and mice, but hard to prove in a human, because who's going to go do a biopsy of their tendon? Nobody. It's too painful. You're going to be limited for a long time. So Yeah, it's all about the fast for performance. If you have a healthy tendon or you're feeling fine, go do all the fast stuff. And if you have a degenerative tendon, have a tendon pain, that's where the slow stuff can come in, because you can in theory get load through the degenerative portions. But not even that matters too much. It's that if you have a painful tendon and you're going to go do the fast stuff, say you have a painful patellar tendon and you're going to go do a vertical jump, your body is not going to load that side the same. Your body's not going to load the quadricep, and your body's not going to load that leg the same. So how do you get your body to load that leg and quadricep the same? Is you go do slow stuff. Because the slow stuff, you force yourself to load it. If you're going to do a split squat, and like, I know Mike doesn't like leg extension. I love leg extension. Leg extension, you can see that you're going to, if your right side is weaker, you're going to do 30 pounds, and your left side is strong, you're going to do 100 pounds. You obviously are not loading your right side because it's significantly weaker when you go do a vertical jump. So let's get that back online by doing slow stuff. Do leg extension, split squats, step ups, and just try to take that weak side and get it up to the strong side. That's, I think, where the slow stuff really comes in, is when there's a bad tendon pain. You don't heal the tendon pain by doing more of the fast stuff. You heal the tendon pain by going and doing the slow stuff, and just looking at the obvious deficits that you have side to side.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Obviously, he doesn't like leg extension, but you mentioned a lot of single leg work. And I think, yeah, when you do single leg work, you're starting to understand. That's what, when I train mostly older people. So whenever they're introduced to single leg stuff and getting off machines, they understand, like, oh, wow, my right side is so much stronger. My left side is so much stronger. They didn't realize it because everything they were doing was either bilateral or on a machine, right? So, but Michael, appreciate that you threw in some single leg stuff. So yeah, going back to that, really. So we need to, like, so what you're talking about is when they already have pain, but from the perspective of good overall training, we definitely need, because the saying was always, train slow, be slow. It's really train slow, be healthy, but you'll still need to train fast, right?
Yeah, there's I mean, I'm probably going off on many different tangents. I told you before we started that this is my challenge with the talk, is to take these hundreds of concepts, put it into one. But there's so many benefits to just getting things right. And yeah, you say training slow. One of the best preventative things for a patellar tendon is having strong quadriceps. Because if you think of doing a jump or a land, your bones are moving. Your femur and your tibia, they're going through ranges of motion, and your attached muscles and tendons, they have to elongate somehow. So when you drop down in a jump and then you raise up in a jump, your muscle stretches somewhat and then it contracts. Your tendon can stretch somewhat and then it can contract. If you have a weak quadricep, or you have a quadricep that actually gets tired very fast, it doesn't want to lengthen much anymore. It doesn't want to elongate. A quadricep that doesn't work well does not want to elongate, so it'll just stay kind of shorter. And if you're still going to go through that range of motion with your bones, how are you going to make up that elongation? You're just going to pull on your tendon more. Your tendon is going to get yanked, and your tendon can only get yanked so much. And the more you yank on the thing, the more damage, the more likelihood you get for rupture. Just this whole sequence of bad events. And that all happened because your quad wasn't healthy and strong. If your quad is healthy and strong, then when you go down, you drop down in the jump and you jump up. And then when you land, your muscle can take so much of that load by elongating a bit, and your tendon doesn't have to take the brunt of it. So I think actually it's weird, because when you start to get the tendon pain, when you start to get patellar tendon or quad Achilles tendon, your muscle shuts down even further, because your brain comes in and wants to shield the joint. So if you have a patellar tendon pain, your quadricep is probably weak, and it's probably doesn't want to elongate very much. So then when you go and do your sport, you're just going to be pulling on your tendon more with everything you do. So you have to do some rehab to address that. And I think I'm not a fan of like the preventative stuff for tendon, but I am a fan of people just doing general good training. And if you do general good training your whole life, you're probably not going to miss the quadriceps. You're going to keep the quadriceps strong and healthy. And that's going to protect your patellar tendon when you go play sport. So it's like lifting good year round, and you're doing the split squats or the step ups, you're doing single leg stuff, squats, hip hinges, stuff like this. Like every session you do, you're addressing that the muscles are strong and the muscles are functioning fine. And that is going to go protect your tendon, because if your muscles are good, they're not gonna pull excessively on the tendon. If your muscles are bad, they're going to pull excessively on the tendon. So it's just good training. Good training is good. I don't like the term preventative, but yeah, it's good. It's good. It's a good preventative measure.
Yeah. What about we can talk about strength. What about this idea of plyometrics? Are we and jump training? Are we putting our clients or athletes in danger by doing repeat this even more? Because, like you said, obviously, the higher the performance, the more we're worried about it. So there's got to be some kind of a balance here with, from that perspective, from the jump training and plyometric. Can you just go over what you like to see with some of this stuff?
Yeah. I think if all they're doing is training, if all they're doing is lifting and then go and live, like I would think an older population, 40, 50, 60, or maybe even older, if that's all they're doing is lifting weights with you, I think you should probably do some plyos because, well, obviously it depends on, yeah, it depends on many things, but I think you should do some plyos because you're training your tendons. You're just training your tendons to store and release energy, which is what they're kind of built for, storing and releasing energy. If you take a younger athlete who's like a soccer player, a basketball player, they're playing a ton of sports, do you need to go and add in more store and release stuff for their tendon? I don't know. It depends. If they're sitting on the bench and not playing for 60 minutes, you could probably add some plyometrics in. If they're playing for 60 minutes and they just did a ton of change of direction and jumping and stuff, you need to do more the next day. Like I think you just kind of there's no science to it, but it's like the art of probably balancing things out. And usually they're gonna feel their muscles will feel stiff, their tendons could feel stiff. You just do some slow strength stuff. That's going to be a therapeutic thing versus adding in more store and release activity. So you could potentially be adding more, and that's a thing we just don't know. You don't know. You never know if you're doing too much until you have a tendon pain, because no one is imaging tendons. Like no one is imaging tendons every week. Well, actually, there are probably some I've talked to some of my pro friends. They're imaging tendons pretty frequently, like in NBA, to see how they're responding to training loads, and then if their tendons are looking really bad, they actually just put them on isometrics or slow strength to try to get their tendons back healthier because it has that stress relaxation effect. Um, so yeah, there's really no way to know, and that's just like making it the best guess of if they've been. You just kind of look and you say, have you been using your tendons like a spring, like an elastic band? Have you been doing a ton of that with your sport and with your practices? Do I need to do more of that in the weight room? Like, I don't think so. It's you're just doing more. You're doing more of that stuff that they're already doing. So to kind of balance things out, you go and do slow strength. You do isometrics, or you do slow heavy lifting. Which if you lift heavy, it's slow anyways. Going to be slow anyways. So it kind of takes care of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no right proper ratio, but I think go back to the population of like that's all they do is train. You probably look at what older people are doing in their lives, and if they got to step off a curb or they got to react somehow, like their Achilles tendon has to be able to withstand that, their patellar quad tendon has to be able to withstand that. And I think doing some lighter plyometrics is a great way. And I think a lot of the plyometrics are a neuromuscular thing, are just getting your muscle and your tendon to work well in that fast motion. And if you're like an older person, that the pathway, the neuromuscular pathway, I think it just gets detrained. And then when you step off the curb, your muscle and tendon are not able to work like they should to dissipate the forces and allow you to not rupture your tendon or injure yourself. So it's like plyometrics. I think the main benefit of plyometrics are getting the muscle and tendon to work synergistically. Because if you don't ever do plyometrics and you have a super strong quadricep, I don't think your super strong quadricep knows how to work with the tendon in a fast manner. So just doing some plyos that are faster ground contacts or something gets everything more synced up so that they work better together. It's like the lifting gives you the material of the muscle mass. The lifting gives you the material of a bigger muscle mass. And if you lift for your whole life, you're also going to have a bigger tendon. But if the main way you want to use your tendons is in the fast things, and if you never do fast things, you have the raw material for it, but you don't have it. It doesn't work well. So that's where the plyometrics or anything fast would come in. That's how you get things to work. The big muscle and the big tendon. That's how you get them to work well. Is doing some form of plyo.
Yeah, and it makes sense because I think when you talk about that and we think of, and it usually happens in someone who's a little bit older who hasn't been doing something like, let's say they're an athlete in their 30s or 40s, or then they go onto the basketball court. Now, all of a sudden, they're trying to get to a certain speed. They haven't progressed to that speed. So they're going really from, 10 miles an hour to 50 miles an hour in their car, right? So it's like all of a sudden, they're not really prepared for that basketball event that their pickup basketball, if they haven't done anything in a while. You see people get hurt like that all the time.
Yeah, I've talked to a number of guys who have ruptured their tendon, their patellar quad tendon. I don't want to create fear in people and say if you haven't played basketball and then you go play on Christmas with your old high school friends, you're going to rupture your tendons. But I
you
think
probably will.
I think that's the neuromuscular thing though. Is your quad and your patellar tendon, they haven't worked in that fast manner for so long. And I think it's as simple as doing plyos like once a week. If you would have just done plyos once a week, like it could be pogo hops or it could be like any jumping activity, some sprinting, like anything where you have to store and release energy and move in a certain way, jumping, running, cutting, changing direction. That's the type of stuff that gets your muscle and your tendon working well together. And if you haven't done that in like a year and then you're gonna go play basketball, yeah, I'm not saying you're gonna rupture your tendon. I think it's just like you're gonna be pretty sore in your muscles after that because they're not working very well. And I think you're really likely to set off your tendon as well because you're just think of I think when people get DOMs from not doing something for a long time, the muscle is so sensitive to DOMs. You know right away that you did something you're unaccustomed to. The tendon is not that sensitive like that. But I think when people get DOMs, their muscle isn't working as well. So go back to that whole thing where I'm saying that a bad muscle shortens. And I think their muscle is shortening, but if they're still going and playing basketball, how are they getting up that elongation? They're getting it from their tendons. So they're pulling on their tendons more. So like you have the DOMs, but I'm like, are you also doing damage to your tendons? I bet you that you are. It's just that tendons are not as sensitive as muscles when it comes to that like acute event. The tendons will be sensitive like that if you've had a tendon pain in the past because you kind of have the environment to get a tendon pain again. So I've had people that they've dealt with jumper's knee for years. They got it under control, and then they never play basketball, and then they go play basketball one day with their friends because their friends are back in town. These guys are like 30, 40 years old, and they now have jumper's knee, and they've had it for like 6 months because of that one basketball game. But you don't see that with everyone. I think you see that with people who've had the jumper's knee in the past because the only predictor of jumper's knee, the best predictor of jumper's knee is have you had jumper's knee in the past? And if you have had jumper's knee in the past, you haven't played basketball an entire year and you're going to go play with your friends for 2 hours, you're prone to get jumper's knee again. So I think you should prepare better and say, I'm going to play on this day in a month from now. So I'm going to start doing some plyos to build up to that. Because the tendon, I think the tendon is so sensitive when you change things. When you change things suddenly, that's when the tendon will blow up. And that is really good rehab, is just never changing things fast. So the slow stuff, keep that in forever. You're probably not going to aggravate your tendons by doing slow stuff. It's healthy for your tendons, good for your muscles. But the fast stuff, if you haven't done the fast stuff in a year and you're going to go do that in one day, that's a bad thing to do. You should build up to the fast stuff, which if it's going to be, for example, if it's going to be 60 minutes of basketball, you could take a month or two prior and just say, I'm going to go play basketball for 10 minutes today. And then because your tendon will actually tell you the next morning if it's happy or not, if what you did was good or bad. So, which is kind of different from other structures because your muscle might tell you immediately. Your patellofemoral joint might tell you immediately. Like all these things are kind of, the tendons are something where they warm up with activity. And if you've done too much, you're not really going to know until later or the next morning because you've been sleeping all day and you get out of bed and it's like, wow, my tendon is super stiff. And then you just say, okay, I think I did a little bit too much yesterday. So the preparation for the fast stuff, when you haven't done the fast stuff in like a year, is pretty simple. You just take that and you just do a lot less of it, a lower volume, probably a lower intensity. And then you look at your tendon the next day. And if your tendon's feeling fine, Maybe you take a couple days off just because you want to. Then you go back and you add a little bit more volume intensity, and you just try to build up to that one event that you're going to have on that one specific day. So it's like with a tendon, you just always take baby steps. If you've been out for a long time, you got to take baby steps.
Sure. And then if we're working in general pop in like an over 30 person, would you say like a phase one probably should be like, hey, let's work on some extra, let's kind of take a step back too. Like let's throw in some isometrics, which maybe you wouldn't do in a phase one. Throw some slower, grindier stuff in there, in that like GPP for 6 weeks, and then start adding plyometrics, but low volume and slowly bring up that volume. Would you say you could kind of almost skip that first phase just to kind of maybe prepare them and work on some of the slow stuff for that for the healthier tendon?
So say that again.
So basically, if I have like if I'm working with a new client and they haven't done much, a lot of times they'll say, well, first phase, they can do some plyometrics. You want to get them. We're going to keep it low, but maybe I should even, that first phase should not even be included, not include plyometrics at all, while I kind of work on some of this slower stuff to kind of increase the tendon health.
Yeah, it could. Yeah. I mean, it's like if they got nothing but time and they're going to be training with you forever, like, yeah, you can, that would be probably the safest way, like, because you're still go back. The tendon only knows that it's getting pulled on. It's elongating or not. And when you're lifting, you're elongating it a little bit. It's not in the fast manner, so it's not the big where it's acting like a sheet and it's it could a potentially damaging thing for the tendon, but it's still stressful to the tendon. Because you could have people that have done absolutely nothing, and you put them on a squat exercise or a split squat or something, and that could actually blow up their tendon. It could blow up their tendon pain the next day because they've done absolutely nothing because you're still stressing the tendon. Any movement stresses the tendon. It's just that you got to look at where the person is at that moment. So like I talk about isometrics are beneficial for tendon health. Isometrics are very good for tendon health. But if you take a person who has tendon pain and they haven't done anything for a few months because they've just been resting and they go do isometrics, they could wake up the next day and their tendon is way worse because it's still stressing their tendon. It's a little bit of stress of their tendon. That's a jump as well. They're going from nothing for like 6 months, and now they're doing one workout of isometrics. It could be a calf raise for their Achilles, and it blows up their tendon. And it's like, well, I thought isometrics were supposed to be good. It's like you went from nothing, you went from no tendon stress to a little bit of tendon stress, but that little bit of tendon stress was still too much tendon stress for you. So a safer way is, if you take someone who hasn't done much for a while, just start with the lifting stuff because you're still stressing the tendon a bit, and then add in some of the plyos. It's not saying you have to do that, but like that would probably be the safest way to go about it because you're also getting, as you're doing the lifting, you're getting some neuromuscular synchronization with the muscle and the tendon. So you're kind of getting a little bit of that. It's not to the extent that you get with a plyo, but you're also giving them time to get done with the muscular soreness, because you get muscular soreness if you haven't lifted in a long time, and then probably maybe some tendon damage as well. So just giving them a little bit of like, what's the phrase? Slow cooking, right? Slow cooking the process.
Sure.
Just give them some lifting at first, and then slowly add in some plyos. Like that's probably the safest bet.
Yeah. Like what you said earlier, obviously you've been doing this for a while. You trained college athletes. You've been working with athletes for a while on, that muscle gain, jumping higher, and rehab from jumper's knee. And you said Jill kind of blew your mind a little bit, and you had been dealing with this for so long. What changed, or what are some of the things that you maybe like, man, I've been doing this wrong, or what did you learn that you felt also you were doing wrong and maybe some people in the industry are doing wrong?
Yeah, it still seems pretty bad out there. And I only know from like the phone consultations I do and then people I interact with through Instagram or Twitter. But yeah, and like some people just get PRP shots immediately. It's crazy, and it's like there's not good evidence on PRP for patellar tendon. There's a little bit for Achilles, some for rotator cuff, but it seems useful in like a dormant tendon, one that's been there chronically for like many months, and I think you're trying to restart the healing process with inflammation and all that whatnot. But people go in and get PRPs immediately. But so there's so many things. This is probably like, but one of the big ones was the rehab of, think for me, I wanted to dunk. I wanted to dunk basketballs again. I was like 18, 19 years old, 20 years old. I couldn't jump without pretty bad pain, and I couldn't really play basketball without pretty bad pain. Um, and you think of the stress that I'm going to put on my tendon when I'm going to go and jump, or when I'm going to go change directions on the basketball court, go from my 100% speed to zero. I got to stop. That's a lot of stress on my patellar tendon. If I'm going to jump and land, a lot of stress on my patellar tendon. And then I go to PT, and we're just doing light things. We're doing like band exercises, and we're doing glute bridges, and we're doing light leg presses. And it's like, okay, that's okay for someone who's really sensitive because you got to start getting some load in there. But where do we bridge the gap from this very low intensity to very high intensity on a tendon? There was no bridging of the gap. So I'm doing that stuff for 2 years. And then I would give it like a few months, and then there was really no direction of when I can start jumping or play again. I would just go try to play a little bit, and it would just blow up again. And I'd be back, feel like I'm back to square one because the rehab was too light. It was too easy on my tendon. I wasn't really strengthening my muscle because I was training so light. I wasn't maximally strengthening my muscle because I was training so light. And having that, well, it wasn't that talk with Jill was it, but for me, I gave up. I gave up on basketball and dunking for like 2 years, and I just got into powerlifting and bodybuilding. So I got crazy strong with my quadriceps and my legs. I got crazy strong, and I wasn't jumping to like piss off my tendon anymore. I wasn't playing basketball to piss off my tendon anymore. And after like I think yeah, after a few months of like getting decently strong with the squat exercise with deadlifts, I went and dunked the basketball. I had no pain. So it was like I gave it so much time off, and then I dunked and there was no pain. Now the thing I learned there was, let's go back to when you go and you just do the lower stress stuff like lifting on your tendon, and then you go jump. So like I still wasn't I could dunk one time and I was fine, but if I went and played a full basketball game, my knee was barking at me again.
Okay.
So it's like, I needed to progress that. So it was like I got super strong, but I had no idea of the progression back to sport. So I kind of had to learn that. And then when I think it was with Jill, that must have been around the time with Jill. I got with Keith Barr, I did isometrics. I got with Jill, learned about the load management. But I had to learn the load management for myself because I was trying, once I got healthy, I started trying to dunk every day. And I could only manage like 2-3 times a week because my knees were hurting so bad. And that's where I kind of had to learn about the load management thing. Like I need to give it some time to adapt, I guess, because I did get to the point where I could dunk every single day and my knees weren't hurting. I just managed the volume and intensity. And that's going from 19 years old when a physical therapist, an older lady, asks me, she's like, what do you want to do? What is your goal with rehab? And I'm like, I want to play basketball again. And she was like, I don't know if that's going to happen. And I was 19 years old, and she tells me that, and I'm like, and I was pretty helpless because nothing had worked for me at the time. And then I'm 30 years old, and I'm dunking basketballs every single day with no pain. So yeah, it was a big learning process of you take someone who's had a chronic tendon pain like that. You have to get significantly stronger in your legs, in your quadriceps and your legs. You have to learn about progressing loads, progressing from heavy lifting back into sport, doing a little bit and then seeing how it feels the next day. And yeah, those were all things Jill just confirmed for me, I guess, But
Sure.
yeah, so it was blowing my mind because it was like confirming my own experience that no one had to that point been able to like put a finger on and explain in the way that she explained. Because it was like the thing she's saying, I'm like, this is exactly what I've went through, and no one had said it in this way. So yeah, it was just counter to a lot of the things out there. I feel like nowadays in the year we're in, I bet you 10 years ago, this information was not out there. No one knew about this stuff. Even 5 years ago, I had no clue that this existed. I don't even know how I came across Jill Cook. So I probably just listened to one of her podcasts maybe. And then now she's like all over the place. And you got Ebony Rio, you got Keith, you got so many people talking about tendons and giving the information that 10 years ago was not accessible. So if someone had a tendon pain 10 years ago, they're going right to passive things like getting injections or getting surgeries or doing light loaded PT and then giving no idea of what the progression back to the high stress things are. There's no progression of light PT to super high stress sport. So I think nowadays those things are definitely getting out there. And Jill just ahead of her time. And her story too, she started with patellar tendon and she had no clue how to help people. People were not getting better with her. So it's like you just learn you learn through failure. Yeah.
Sure. So, all right. So let's wrap it up with just getting an overview of tendons for trainers. You're going to be speaking at MBSC in the spring. And Jake, if we listen to this podcast, people are going to, there's a lot of art to this. Okay. So I could imagine the challenge you're going to have in presenting this material from the perspective of, there's so many different variables involved. Give us an overview of really how you're going to structure this to kind of give people some things that they can take away and start doing with their clients.
Okay. This might go pretty good because I've tried now 2-3 times. I've given presentations for people, or I've given 2-3 presentations to try to explain tendons in a coherent manner, which maybe up to this point of the podcast, a lot of it's not coherent because there's just so many aspects to it. But I think how I'm going to do it is, you first of all need to start out, anyone who's in pain, I think it helps to get a good diagnosis of what the pain is. And we can't do that if you're a trainer or a strength coach. Like, you can't diagnose pain. They probably need to get it from a medical, like a doctor and or orthopedic, someone like that, who can look at signs and symptoms, who can maybe some people need imaging. You never really know what's going on. So it helps to confirm that, because if we talk about the anterior knee, there's so many structures. There's bursa at the knee. There's a kneecap. There's a trochlear groove. There's could be plica issue. There could be a fat pad issue. There's so many things around the knee that could be causing the pain. You go to the Achilles. There's so many things at the Achilles that could be causing pain. So it kind of helps to get a good idea, I guess, of what's going on. And maybe, you know what? Maybe you don't need to go to a medical practitioner, because sometimes the signs and symptoms, you can just ask the person and get a good idea, because it's not like you need to get a diagnosis before you can exercise. Like, you don't need to get a diagnosis before you can partake in exercise. It's just that it kind of helps you understand. It could kind of help you understand. So I think how I'll start out, because I know so much about the anterior knee and different signs and symptoms of different pains, is kind of give an idea there on the anterior knee, and then that would also carry over to the Achilles. So I think, first of all, starting out of like, I could change this in the meantime. So I could change this before the presentation happens, but kind of get a good idea of what the pain is, because we really only care about the tendons and when someone has tendon pain. Get a good idea of what's going on at the joint. And then second, so now we're going to say we've confirmed it's a tendon pain, and then I'm going to say, what is the purpose of a tendon? Like, why do we even have tendons in our body? And that would go down to, they can connect the muscle to the bone. They can store energy from the muscle, which then can be released faster, so you can have power amplification. Like, if you didn't have tendons in your body, it would be so difficult to just move. It would be so difficult to walk. It would all require muscular power. Like, you'd be exhausted after a few minutes of walking, because your tendon doesn't need any ATP, doesn't need any energy to work. It just works. It's just this elastic band that is working because the muscle is pulling on it. And when the muscle pulls, when the muscle just applies force, it doesn't have to go eccentric and concentric. It doesn't take any energy. It doesn't take any energy to just do work, to just pull, to just be isometric. So because we have tendons like that in our wrists too, they conserve energy. So we can go about our daily life without having to exhaust a ton of energy by just walking or just going upstairs, because our tendons can. So that's kind of the purpose of tendon, is just to store and release energy. And then another one is that it can be kind of this energy buffer. So when you land from a jump, the energy initially goes into your tendon, because it goes into your tendon, then it slowly releases to the muscle, so the muscle can eccentrically take that. Because you know about eccentric fast muscle contractions are crazy damaging for your muscles. Our body doesn't want to do that. So it has the first line of defense of storing that energy in the tendon and then more slowly releasing it to the muscle. And that protects the muscle. So those are kind of some of the purposes of tendon. And then I'll go into the structure of tendon. What is it made out of? Collagen type 1. It kind of has a different fascicles. It has a gel around the fascicles, which protects the collagen. There's a tendon hierarchy and multiple levels that protect the collagen within the tendon. Because when you build the collagen in your tendon, in puberty. So your tendon is built by the time you're 17 years old, and then it doesn't really change after 17 years old. So your body does everything it can to protect what you've built. It has this hierarchy of it starts with the whole tendon, then it goes down to a fascicle, then it goes down to a fibril, then it goes down to collagen, and all that collagen was built by the time you're 17. So for you, you're not really changing your tendon much. For me, I'm not really changing my tendon much. So my tendon does everything it can to protect everything that I built within. So I'll talk about the structure, then I'll go to the function, how the tendon works based off of like muscle pull, based off the viscoelastic properties. Then probably start talking about tendon pain, like what's going on in tendon pain, because you have a tendinopathy continuum, which some tendon pains that are acute, they just take a little bit of rest and they go away. Some tendon pains that are chronic, that have been there for months and weeks and months, they don't go away with rest. You have to get on a loading program. Then I'll kind of talk about tendon rehab, and then probably at the end, just like if the people have not had tendon pain, I'm not a fan of prevention, but we'll go on tendon prevention, what you can do. And that's, and again, that's just going to be good training. If you just do thorough training and you address all of the joints and all of the muscles, and you do it in a smart manner where you're not going of like, all right, we did 20 reps and now we're going to do 1 rep maxes today, or we haven't done any jumping and now we're going to go on to high depth drops for your patellar tendon. Like just taking baby steps, in your training is probably the best way to prevent tendon issues. And one of the main issues with that, because I worked in college strength, is you can take all the baby steps you want as a strength coach, and then the sport coach will not take baby steps, and then you blow up tendons. So it's kind of it can be tough.
Yep. Good stuff. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Jake. This is an interesting topic. I think it's funny. We're getting, I think fascia right now is the very hot topic. So, but you guys are pushing this conversation, which is great. I don't think we get enough of it, and love that you're doing this. So thanks for coming on and talking all about tendons for trainers. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for episode 375 of the Strength Coach Podcast. The show notes are located at strengthcoachpodcast.com. Don't forget, you can try the new strengthcoach.com for 7 days for free. Go to strengthcoach.com for your 7-day trial. Special thanks to Chris Pryor and the folks over at Perform Better. Don't forget, save the dates. The Perform Better Functional Training Summits are coming. Lineups are not out, but the locations and dates are Orlando, Chicago, LA, and Providence. It is now a Thursday pre-con with all day Friday and Saturday, no more Sunday. Check it all out at performbetter.com. Thanks to Coach Boyle and Jake Tuura for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength conditioning and performance enhancement and tendons. Thanks to Sumit Seth and Naamly, helping build relationships through personalized communication so your members stay longer and pay longer. That's going to do it for this episode. My name is Anthony Renna. Thanks for listening, and I'll speak to you next time.